Hey academic weapons, and welcome to the first episode of AP US History. We'll be covering Unit 1, which covers the years 1491 to 1607. Just a reminder, my name is David, and I am the founder and CEO of Student Express, where I help to make videos so you can stress less. I currently attend the Catholic University of America in DC, where I'm studying markets and political economy. I would just like to reference that all people that teach an AP course on our channel have scored either a 4 or a 5, which uniquely makes us able to relate to the material as we just took the exams just a few years ago. A quick thing I would like to mention at the beginning of each video, each unit rather, is that we're a company made for the students. Made for students by students. We are not affiliated with, endorsed by, or sponsored by the College Board or any of its subsidiaries. We do not claim any official connection to the AP program. All AP-specific exercises and materials where references are publicly available resources. Any materials labeled as Student Express are original works created by our team of students. With that being said, let's dive into the early Americas. So when we have to understand the early Americas is that this period is going to cover the Native American life prior to the arrival of Europeans and the impacts that the Columbian Exchange had on Africans, Native Americans, and Europeans. So how did we get here? There is a theory called the land bridge theory, which is a literal land bridge that connected Alaska and present-day Siberia, Russia, and it was said that people would have followed herds of animals as migration occurred over the land bridge into Alaska and eventually North America. What's important to notice here is that we have very nomadic societies, but when they get to the Americas, they start to become more sedentary. And this is thanks to the agricultural revolution, which is a very important term to know, or otherwise known as the Neolithic Revolution. Now, people settled through all parts of the Americas. And first we're going to touch on North America. So we have the Southwest, which is where you had maize cultivation, which is a very important crop to the Native American people. If you took AP World History, you can relate it to champa rice. It's very, very important, but allowed for permanent villages and social diversification. If you're not worried about where you're going to hunt, you're able to start developing other activities of leisure. Followed by this, we have the Great Basin and the Great Plains, which featured more mobile lifestyles as a hunted bison, and so it was a more nomadic society. Then we have the Mississippi River Valley, which was a mix of farming and hunting, and we also had permanent villages there. In the Northwest, we had fishing and hunting and gathering, and we also had semi-permanent villages there as well. It's important to know for the Northeast that there were still farming communities, but it did still rely largely on hunting, especially as you get further towards the Midwest. So here's a brief timeline of settling in the Americas. It's not necessarily important to know off the top of your head who conquered what, who developed what state, but it's just a brief outline of where we are in the world. We will definitely talk about Spain in this video, and in the next video, we'll feature heavily on France. So, exploration. How did we get here? How did other people get here? And what is the Columbian Exchange? The Columbian Exchange is the spread of ideas and technology. We have a few things. Things spread to Europe, things spread to the America, and things were a result of the Spanish conquest. So there's a few things to outline about motivations for exploration. God, gold, and glory. The 3 G's that you need to know. Gold, pretty self-explanatory, to grow the economy and to get resources and precious metal. God was a very big part of exploration and conquests that occurred, especially in South America. The Spanish wanted to spread their religion amongst other things. And then, of course, you have glory. Who doesn't want to discover a country? That's pretty cool. But what's important to get out of this is that the Columbian Exchange is the exchange of objects, food and technology, ideas, and disease. To Europe, we had maize, potatoes, and tomatoes, which resulted in population growth. And, of course, the precious metals like gold resulted in the development of a capitalist society. To the Americas, we have horses, pigs, wheat, But unfortunately, diseases did come over on the ships from Europe, which wiped out the native population. The important disease to know here is smallpox. And then with the Spanish conquest, you have Hernan Cortez and Francisco Pizarro, which resulted in also other epidemics of their own nature and other diseases, but also resulted in animals, crops, weapons, which reshaped the societies. Now we're going to briefly talk about the triangular trade. We'll cover this a lot more as we progress to Unit 2, 3, and 4, but it's important to really understand the effects that the triangular trade had. So all the triangular trade is the trade across the Atlantic, but there's something important to know, and it's the Middle Passage, which was the importation of people from West Africa to the Americas. Now, if we take a look at this graph, the people didn't just come over to the Americas on their own. So what happened is Europeans came down to West African coast, and they made a lot of deals, and in some cases they did not, and they just took people, and they were brought across the Middle Passage. One stop, South America, second stop, the Caribbean, and third stop, North America, where they were forced to do very, very labor-intensive activities. In the Caribbean, the important thing to know there is that they would cultivate a lot of sugarcane. And then in the South America, they eventually replaced the encomienda system, which we'll talk about next. But as the enslaved Africans went to different parts of the Americas, and as they started participating in labor, there was a result of raw materials. Those raw materials were taken by big old Europe, and they were made into manufactured goods. And those manufactured goods were sent back down to West Africa, where they were like, hey, we'll give you some guns in return in exchange for some people. So what we're getting at here is that there's a spread of ideas, technology, and disease, and of course, labor. Now, the Spanish and Portuguese empires. We have this very important treaty listed on the screen, which separated the world into two. We have the Spanish and we have the Portuguese. The Spanish are featured on the left, with the only Portuguese really remnant part in today's society is Brazil. I think it is the #1 largest Portuguese-speaking location in the world. But this really just split up colonization into two. What's important here is that we have the encomienda system, which was the Spanish labor system. It forced a lot of laws. It forced the conversion to Christianity away from a lot of the gods that were such as the Aztec Mayan gods with Hernan Cortez. So that was a point of contention there. Also, the extrapolation of gold in South America was absolutely huge. But we have a problem. If you're enslaving the people that live there, you have a greater risk of having revolution. So, although a lot of people did die out from diseases, the Spanish just realized that this could not go on. The people knew the area too well, and they did not. They were foreigners in their own territory. So what do? If we reference back to the map on the previous slide, they brought in slave labor from Africa because they're in an unfamiliar environment, and they were able to really exercise that control over them. Another thing here is that the cultural integration, you have the integration of Spanish ideologies upon the people in South America. With that being said, let's go on to some practice. So this excerpt, and I'm going to walk you through how to answer an MCQ AP question. This excerpt is a short account of the destruction of the Indies from 1542. Now, there's some important things to do when reading something like this. Yes, there is a lot of information on this slide. So let's walk through it together. Given that the indigenous peoples of the region are naturally so gentle, so peace-loving, so humble and so docile, are of themselves inquisitive, tyrannical, contrary to natural canon and civil law, and are deemed wicked and condemned, and prescribed by all such legal codes, I therefore concluded that it would constitute a criminal neglect of my duty to remain silent about the enormous loss of life, as well as the infinite number of human souls dispatched to hell in the course of such conquests. Now we're looking at the AP question right here. There's a few keywords. Especially when you're doing writing, you need to know describe versus explain. but we'll get to that in another video when we do some SAQ and FRQ practice. The most important word here is most. And which of these answers are most likely a result of this? So A, we have Spanish efforts to forcibly convert indigenous peoples to Protestantism. B, French trade alliances with Native Americans. Now we know because of this. If you took Spanish, you know this is Spanish. But even if you didn't, you'll know because they're talking about the indigenous people of the region that this and conquests are associated with the Spanish, cannot be the French. And we are not talking about trade. We are not talking about Native Americans. So we can eliminate B. C, Spanish conquest supported by the encomienda system. That is also a possible answer. It mentions conquest, and it talks about the cruel abuses. Then we have British settlement along the Atlantic coast. This answer is not specific enough. A lot of places on the Atlantic coast. And we're not talking about North America here, or the British, or any settlement. So now we have between A and C. And we know that Spanish are largely Catholic, so it's not going to be Protestantism. That's just a random fun fact. You don't have to know that. But this paragraph, let's see what it talks about. The indigenous people are gentle and docile. We talk about civil law being violated. The civil laws are wicked. Legal codes. And then we have conquests. And a huge, huge, huge issue with the loss of human life. So we're going to go with C, which is the correct answer, because all details in this passage promote the idea that there's some sort of exploitation going on here, which would be through the Spanish encomienda system. That's a wrap for APUSH Unit 1, so give yourselves a pat on the back if you made it this far in the video. And next up will be APUSH Unit 2, which covers the year 1607 to 1754. We are breezing through these units and covering the main ideas. So remember, academic weapons, if you need videos, if you need any review materials, come to us because we'll help you stress less and prepare for your AP exam. Thank you for watching and have a great day.